welcome to today's brave conversation starter on the topic, drumroll please, ethical leadership. If you are curious to know, I'm Fatima Mawasa at Rodin School, South Africa.
And I'm Marissa Patnaik from Sai International School in India. Over the past few weeks, students across the Roundsword community have interviewed 14 keynote conversationalists from different backgrounds and areas of expertise to find out where they think we should start our discussions today.
So let's hear what the interviewers asked and the speakers had to say on this topic, ethical leadership.
What do you believe ethical business leadership is, and what is the key to effective and authentic servant leadership?
Servant leadership for me is sacrificing, being there, putting people first, but also making sure that you're in a healthy space, like mentally and physically as well. Meeting the needs of others in your community, so not being selfish about resources that you have, like thinking of ways to share what you have, whether it's knowledge, whether it's resources, whether it's networks, and also opening doors for other people as you go up, right? And so ethical leadership, it's very important for me, especially in business, because there are so many ways people run businesses unethically. It's all about making a profit. They don't care how the environment is impacted. They don't care how their employees are impacted.
I think that society sometimes focuses too much on leadership versus ethics, right? Because, leading to what? Leadership almost in a dictionary definition is just, kind of guiding people to something. And what that thing is, you just fill in the blank. Could be a terrible thing, could be a great thing, could be meaningless, could be change the world. So leadership alone, again, I think is almost a biological interest of humans, right? The person at the top, we're a tribal species and the order and hierarchy of things. So we think about leadership a ton just because maybe it's a reaction, I don't know. But what I think is more important is what you're saying, which is ethics. But still, there's a fill in the blank there as well. Because I know that the folks who are watching this video, watching this, they're coming from all different walks of life. And what is ethical is going to be different in different countries, even through the course of time and history. What they thought was ethical then is not ethical now. So I believe part of what leadership needs to be is, an evaluation of that, right?
So, when we talk about ethics, it's almost like a kind of Hippocratic oath in a lot of ways, do no harm. I think that should be a starting point for certain. We don't want to harm the populace. Can you always be effective and be ethical? Well, it's almost hard to always be anything all of the time. So probably not, but for the greater good or for the long run, sure, I think that ethics and effectiveness can be very much co-pilots.
I think we should all start with a commitment to be the best person we can, to express our values. That doesn't mean you live up to them, but at least express what your values are. One of the problems we have with many political and other leaders today, we don't know what their values are. They never tell you. And, and the other thing is motivation. What is your motivation? If it's, be upfront. If it's about money and power, then say so, because there'll be a certain segment of society that'll accept that. I won't, but there'll be others who do in certain, but be upfront, because that's the troubling thing. There are people who are doing good things, but you're kind of disappointed by their actual motivation, right? And to me, ethical leadership is not about sort of living up to that ethic as well. It's about expressing your values and being open about your motivation. That is ethical to me, because then I see what I get.
Are ethical principles the most important considerations for leadership? And is it possible for leaders to be both effective and ethical?
I think we should, choose our leaders on the basis of the leadership ability. Are they able to like deliver as well? Are they able to like execute? Are they standing up for the rights of everyone? And are they who they say they are? Because it's easy for someone to sort of advertise this is who they are, and then they like switch. So I think it's very important that we look at all the things that we consider, an individual, that they are worthy of like leading, right? So so I think that's how we should choose our leaders.
Should leadership have ethical principles? Definitely yes, because if a leader is not ethical, I don't think you can even consider that person as a leader in the first place. So those are necessary conditions, not non-negotiable. Here comes the dilemma. The dilemma is, on one side, the rational intellectual part says these are the things that we need from a leader. One who is calm, one who is systematic, one is knowledgeable, one who has experience, all the different criteria. But then here comes the emotional part. You get swayed by the character, the personality, the celebrity style leaders. You get swayed by promises when the rational part says that doesn't make sense because there's some contradictions and stuff like that. But the emotional part sort of we are all biased. We are human beings, so we tend to get the person might be charismatic. I won't use anything more than charismatic, which will have in terms of appearances and all that stuff. So we have this I don't know whether I should call it the moral dilemma in picking leaders, but that's the actual reality on the ground.
We have seen a move from ethical leadership being one of the most important considerations when deciding on who to lead us. And we've seen a move towards populism, where it's how popular are you? And so, it's almost like a contest for fame as opposed to be a contest for leadership. Leadership requires more than being famous. Leadership requires more than how many clicks and how many views, how many likes you can get. Because leadership often requires you to make hard decisions. Leadership often requires you to do the uncomfortable things, but to do the right things. And so when we have ethical leaders, those are the leaders that are not willing to compromise on their values just so that they can be more popular. And this, we've got to protect this aspect of ethical leadership, and especially when it comes to our democracies around the world. And so for your generation, I think even as you decide about leadership in all your different platforms that you're working in, it has to come back to, what are the values that the person is living by? And how do they demonstrate that? What is their track record? What has it shown?
I would say if you are being led by only people who are famous to the highest degree, that might be something to think about. Because the filters that get you to fame don't necessarily align sometimes with what is right and wrong. They can, right? There's plenty of people who are super famous that are awesome people, better people than me. But the point is that shouldn't actually be the criteria. That shouldn't be what determines it. So even in the thought and lens of social media, let's say for one example, are you only following what just kind of tripped across your path and then you said, yeah, I like that? Or did you seek out who you look up to? Did you actually search for that? Or are you letting whatever just kind of gets thrown at you to be who you are and what you believe? I do believe that we should manicure, we should audit, we should adjust the social media following sometimes based on who, not just what comes to us, but who we want to be, right? And unsubscribe things to things that we don't think help us guide in that direction. Because any way you slice it, you're going to be entertained.
I personally would prefer to have an AI algorithm decide on all these things. So that would be something that might have a differing opinion with some of the other speakers. But I would say we should use well-designed AI algorithms that is based on a participatory process by the people to say, this is what we need, this is what we don't want, this is what we want, looking at all the different voices, write an algorithm and then let it run its course.
All leaders to some degree, right, are about they have the authority and power to make decisions. Okay. And where do they make the wrong decision? Because that's where they screw up. There are some scholars who study this very carefully and said, look, typically what the common leadership mistake, and this is a professor at the Kennedy School, he's a psychiatrist, Ronald Heifetz, he did a lot of work about when a leader looks at something and makes the mistake by thinking it's a technical challenge, where, what do I mean by technical challenge? It's a problem that the solution is known and it's simply about mobilizing resources, people's attention, or making a commitment to take the solution and apply it to the problem. Done. The mistake is when it's not when a leader thinks it's a technical problem, but it's an adaptive problem. It's a problem that's never been seen. And so you respond thinking you have the right answer because you said, okay, it's like a misdiagnosis, right? Like, this is what it is. Now we just need to go put money or people at it, but it isn't what it is. It's actually something else. And that's typically the mistake that leaders will make. They will see a technical challenge and try to address it as such, and what they've known in the solution. When it's an adaptive challenge, you have to recognize, like, this is totally new. We don't know how to do it. So how do you do it? And this is the real mistake that leaders do, is to think, well, it's a new problem, so I need to think about it. Wrong. The answer is not with the leader. The answer is going to be with the people or the stakeholders closest to the problem, and consulting them and engaging them to come up with a solution. It's not about the leader going into a room and saying, dang, I've never seen that problem before. How am I going to figure this out? Maybe I'll search. And no, it's actually about reaching out to others.
Well, I think some of the things that I've learned in my own life and career is that, first of all, you have to listen to people. You cannot be isolated, even as a scientist. You know, if I were to stay within my institution or within my laboratory and never interact with the community, I wouldn't know what the real problems were. And maybe I wouldn't be focusing on the real problems. So for me, every time I've gone into the community and talked to people there, I've always come back very humbled, because I realize what I thought was a priority is not the priority for this particular community that I was with. Secondly, I think humility, because science teaches you humility. You think you knew it all one day, and then the next day there's a new discovery, a new finding, and you have to change your views and adapt your views if indeed the data is telling you that. The third is being honest, open, transparent with people. I think particularly for political leaders, it's really important, because we've seen that where citizens have trust in their governments, where they've trusted their leaders, whether they were public health leaders or whether they were politicians, those countries did much better at controlling the pandemic than where leaders were basically leading people astray and giving them false hopes or false ideas. So I think that's really very important. Taking people into confidence and a participatory style, I would say, of governing, where you are not just listening to people, but taking ideas. Again, I think to make big changes in society, you cannot do it top down. So you need to bring communities with you, take them with you, and they need to feel that this is going to make a difference to their lives.
What great conversation should we be having about ethical leadership?
We have a deficit of trust
We have a deficit of honesty. We have a deficit of genuine responsibility, sort of taking responsibility and holding themselves accountable. We have an overflow of ego and bombast, which I think sometimes is like, is it hiding insecurity? I don't know, but we need leaders who will either admit when they've made mistakes, apologize for them, or frankly, resign. You screwed it up, go, right? Why are you sticking there?
I think we have a right to have ethical leaders and things, but we're also responsible in making sure that they have the safety to make mistakes, that we don't judge what they're doing now entirely based on what they did in the past. I think we're in a space, though, where you need to appreciate that maybe at the moment in time when we really need people to go into certain professions, politics or government, that we simply say, hey, everybody that's in politics or that they're not ethical, how else would they be in politics, or something like that. I think we have to avoid that cynicism.
When I think about ethical leadership, I don't necessarily think about it as a pursuit to rightness and a complete avoidance of wrongness. I think it's an ability to be accommodating enough. One, to allow people to make mistakes. One, a space that allows people truth over correctness, and a space that allows variance and not ignorance, but lack of understanding that has an ability to become something different, and lack of understanding, but with a teachable spirit. So I don't make a lot of assertions when it comes to like the concept and like the story around ethical leadership, because I think when people talk about ethical leadership, they want to say this is right and that is wrong, and everybody that lives on the wrong side must be chastised and everybody that lives on the right side must be celebrated. And I think there's a lot in the middle there, and we have to be prepared to even at least investigate what sits in the middle between right and wrong, to one, create understanding, and to then also understand that we can't all think the same. So you and I, just by virtue of a geographical accident, have very fundamentally different principles. And so this idea that I would then want to impose my ethics or my moralities on you, and if I don't get it right, I vilify you, I think is very wrong. And I think it's part of the reason why when you and I are not having a brave conversation, we could end up strangling each other. And so I speak from a very, like a place of a lot of ignorance and a lot of lack of clarity. So I tread with caution when it comes to ethics and leadership and what that means. And it's for those reasons that I put out that I say that.
I think leadership, and to me, when the transformation comes, when we're able to see the shared humanity, right? The truth of the other. That each of us has our own truths, and experiences. But when you actually bring it together, and you're like, okay, even if that means that I have to acknowledge that I did harm, right? That willingness to acknowledge and to apologize. How many world leaders apologize for the wrongs that they've done, as opposed to doubling down? It's almost like they're afraid of apology. It's as if apology is a sign of weakness. I don't think so. I think apology is a sign of strength.
What do you feel or what are your thoughts on how we as society pick and choose our leaders and how we follow them? And what do you think our expectations of our leaders should be?
Ask yourself, what are you buying, right? Who are you voting for, right? What are you supporting? And that might be one of the deeper levels of questions when it comes to accountability. Are you accountable for what you pay people to do? Well, who you vote for, what you support, even tangentially, because that person would have never been in power if hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people didn't make individual decisions that actually got them there. So yes, it's easy to get upset at that person because they have so much capability to make a change, but just obsessing about that and not worrying about our own kitchen is certainly not the way.
I think ethical leadership is, and stateswomanship, if you want, is really what we're missing right now in the world. The world is really craving this, right? And to me, ethical leadership, as I said before, it's being able to see and understand the totality of the human experience that you're dealing with, right? And being able to empathize with that. And having the courage to stand for what is the right thing, what is the fair thing to do, even if it means that you're going to be upsetting some of the most powerful entities in your group.
I think the brave conversation on ethical leadership has to be, how can we have a new leadership based on cooperation, on partnership, on equality, on respect. And that will address the issue of patriarchy. That will address the very tormenting issue of race. You know, look at the Black Lives Matter marches. Look at all of the violence the indigenous people have faced and the boarding schools here. I hope you all will take up this issue. Why do children have to be torn away from their parents? To make them forget their culture and allow them to die. But we have better ways to learn through mutuality. I think another element is we've been cultured to celebrate violence. We now need to start celebrating non-violence. And we have a beautiful word for it in our language. Gandhi was prophet of non-violence, as was Martin Luther King, as was Mandela. And these are the people who brought through change through non-violence, not causing harm. Defining your strength. So it's not power over others. It is power from within to give power to others. And there's a very beautiful word in our language called Shakti. Shakti, the power to act. Also the word for women's power, the feminine power of the universe. So these are conversations we need to have. We need to have discussion on different ways of leadership.
As a leader, if I'm able to mobilize people and to get something done and the motivation or the objective is for the benefit of the team or the community, the group, that's great. If I'm mobilizing people to get things done for my own personal interest, that's more manipulative. And that's why we don't trust those kinds of leaders and elites. So you need elites. They exist everywhere. Every country, every civilization has a group of people, and they might identify because their occupation, could be even their religious affiliation, their ethnicity or such, but for whatever reason, they're very efficient working together to getting things done for the whole. Because you can imagine, you don't want, certain things, big plans of the city. Do you want, 1,000, all the inhabitants part of the design? It'd be, kind of like the joke about a camel is a horse designed by committee. You need some people who understand, who represent the interest of the community and will do so and come together and design something for the benefit of the community. And you trust those people and they're a small group. And that's what scholars like Menker and Olson and others talked about, political scientists and sociologists, about elites. They provide the coordination capacity you need to get something done, particularly complicated things.
Leaders need to look over the horizon, right? They need to look into the future and anticipate and imagine. Einstein has a saying that imagination is more important than knowledge. He doesn't mean that you shouldn't know. What he means is that you should know what we know, but you need to be able to imagine the alternatives as well. What else is out there that can help us get through the problem and solve the problems that we have. So I think leadership has to have creativity in it. It has to have the ability to be humble, the ability to absorb the pain of others and recognize it, the ability to empathize, and the ability to have an ethical sort of light that shines through and is guiding you as you go through the work that you do every day.
That was a great introduction from our speakers to some of the ideas we're going to discuss in Baraza groups around the topic of ethical leadership. They began with some thoughts about what constitutes ethical leadership, and they talked about what to expect of our leaders.
I personally found the comment about the humaneness in leaders quite profound. The mere idea that leaders are just mere imperfect humans like all of us, and we have to accept that and be willing to forgive them, we encourage them to be open and honest with the people they lead.
And then there's the question of how we choose our leaders. To what extent is popularity winning over integrity? And how do we spot the difference? Lots to talk about.
I agree. So now let's move on to our Baraza breakout rooms. I hope this film has inspired you to have your own brave conversation and you are just in awe and curiosity of all the opinions presented.